Step out of the car, lady. I don't care who you think you are. You think your badge or fancy title means you're above the law? The officer's voice dripped with contempt, every movement laced with aggression and racial bias. He wielded his taser like a threat, aiming to humiliate and intimidate, unaware that the woman he targeted held power far beyond his authority, and that his extreme racism would backfire spectacularly. Before we start the story, tell me, where are you watching from? And if these stories speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It was a clear, sunny afternoon on Highway 101. Traffic moving steadily. Drivers glancing at the landscape and passing signs, unaware of the tense confrontation about to unfold. FBI Director Khloe Davis, early 40s, black, wearing a dark professional suit and sunglasses, drove her black SUV with her usual calm confidence. Her federal security detail was discreetly positioned, keeping watch, their presence invisible to the casual observer. Officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy police uniform with a badge and utility belt, had pulled over Khloe's vehicle. His posture aggressive, fingers twitching near his taser. His extreme racism was evident from the instant he approached, tone dripping with contempt, voice loud and commanding. "License and registration, now," Carter barked, leaning over the driver's side window, eyes scanning Khloe with suspicion and derision. His gestures were exaggerated, chest forward, shoulders squared, attempting to project dominance. Passing motorists slowed down, some reaching for their phones to record what they sensed was an unusual confrontation. Carter's extreme racism colored every word, every smirk, every motion, clearly indicating that he assumed a black woman, despite her professional appearance, was automatically guilty or inferior. Khloe remained composed, calm but alert. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, posture upright, eyes steady behind her sunglasses. She recognized the potential danger, the way Carter's actions were fueled by bias, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of panic. "Officer, I'd like to handle this professionally," she said evenly, voice measured yet firm. Her words had authority, and yet Carter ignored them, stepping closer with a malicious grin, taser in hand. Carter's body language was intimidating, leaning slightly forward, one hand on his hip, the other subtly brandishing the taser, as if to remind her he controlled the situation. His extreme racism came through not just in words, but in the way he glanced at her black skin, rolling his eyes and muttering, "Think you're too good to follow the rules?" His tone was patronizing, attempting to diminish her credibility, his confidence fueled by prejudice. The scene caught the attention of other motorists. Phones emerged from car windows. Some recorded the unfolding interaction, capturing the biased behavior of a police officer exercising authority recklessly. Carter, unaware of Khloe's true identity, continued escalating, thinking his display of dominance and racial bias would intimidate her into submission. Khloe subtly signaled her security detail. Within seconds, two agents, in plain clothes but easily recognizable by their attentive posture and alert eyes, moved strategically around her SUV. Every movement was calm, calculated, a silent message that she was not alone and that her safety was being monitored. The extreme racism from Carter became more evident as his aggressive approach intensified. He had no idea that the woman he was attempting to humiliate held far more authority than he could ever wield. As Carter leaned over the car, taser partially raised, Khloe maintained her composure. She allowed him to expose himself fully, knowing that every word, gesture, and act of extreme racism was being captured, not only by bystanders, but by federal surveillance. Her eyes met his through the windshield, steady and unwavering, projecting a calm strength that contrasted sharply with his growing frustration and desperation. The tension reached a peak as Carter finally activated the taser, aiming to assert dominance. But Khloe's preparedness ensured the device's threat remained symbolic rather than effective. Her security detail stepped closer, a silent but visible reminder that any act of violence or extreme racism would be immediately recorded and documented for accountability. By this moment, passing motorists were fully engaged, recording, reacting in disbelief at the officer's brazen misuse of authority, fueled by racial bias. The extreme racism displayed was no longer subtle. It was blatant, undeniable, and documented from multiple angles. Khloe, poised and professional, waited for the perfect moment to assert control without escalating the situation further, demonstrating courage under pressure while exposing blatant discrimination. The scene ended with Carter pausing, confusion and irritation flickering across his face, as he realized that his assumption of dominance based on race and authority might not go unchallenged. Khloe's calm and strategic positioning had turned his extreme racism into a liability, setting the stage for immediate accountability and a dramatic revelation of her true identity. The sun was beginning its slow descent over Highway 101, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Cars continued to stream past, some slowing to watch the unfolding confrontation, others discreetly recording with smartphones. Black FBI Director Khloe Davis, early 40s, wearing her dark tailored suit and sunglasses, remained calm and upright in the driver's seat, her hands on the steering wheel, exuding control despite the intensity of the situation. Her daughter, safely at home, was not present, but the weight of representing black women in positions of power lingered in her mind, fueling her determination. Officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, in a dark Navy police uniform with badge and utility belt, had fully stepped into his role as aggressor, his extreme racism on full display. He leaned over the SUV window, one hand brandishing the taser, the other gesturing wildly, as if to assert dominance over someone he presumed beneath him. "You think your fancy FBI badge makes you untouchable?" he shouted, voice sharp, laced with prejudice. "I don't care who you know. You follow my rules, now!" His tone and posture screamed intimidation, an attempt to humiliate Khloe publicly and assert authority through racial bias. Khloe's expression remained steady, eyes sharp behind her sunglasses, body rigid but controlled. Every movement was deliberate, projecting authority while remaining non-confrontational. She knew that any sudden motion could escalate the situation, and she had to maintain control to ensure her safety and document Carter's extreme racism. Subtly, she reached for her earpiece, signaling her federal security detail that the situation was escalating. Two agents, dressed in plain clothes but alert and disciplined, moved quickly and quietly, flanking the SUV on either side, positioning themselves to intervene if necessary. Their presence was calm but unmistakable, a visual message to Carter that Khloe was not alone and that any act of aggression would be immediately challenged. Carter, blinded by his prejudice, but terrified, did not notice the growing number of witnesses capturing the scene on their phones. Passing motorists slowed, some stopping entirely, their cameras aimed at the tense standoff. Extreme racism was apparent in every word, gesture, and posture from the officer. Smirks, eye rolls, and mocking laughter punctuated his threats. His belief that a black woman in authority could be intimidated, fueling his behavior. Yet every action he took only exposed him further, creating a record of bias and abuse. Khloe, using her strategic awareness, allowed the confrontation to continue just long enough for the evidence to accumulate. She spoke calmly but firmly. "Officer, I request that you step back and conduct yourself professionally. Your actions are being documented." The statement was measured, professional, and commanding, directly countering Carter's attempts at intimidation. Her words carried the weight of her position, revealing that she had authority far beyond what he could comprehend in the moment. Carter's body language shifted slightly, frustration flickering across his face. His attempt to dominate through extreme racism was being met with unyielding calm and meticulous documentation. Every sarcastic smirk and derisive comment he made was recorded, his power undermined by the very behavior he thought would assert control. The irony of the situation was palpable. Extreme racism, which he had wielded as a weapon, was now building the case against him. The tension on the highway attracted the attention of local law enforcement and news crews nearby. The scene, already captured by multiple civilians, was spreading quickly. Social media clips highlighting the extreme racism of a public officer abusing his position. Carter, desperate to regain the upper hand, attempted to intimidate Khloe with a raised voice and closer approach, taser partially extended. Khloe's calm reaction and composed body language created a stark contrast, drawing public attention to his aggressive, biased behavior. Carter, extreme racism became increasingly obvious to the few drivers who had stopped to watch. One motorist, an older man in his 50s, muttered under his breath, "This guy's way out of line. Look at the way he's treating her just 'cause she's black." The murmurs spread like wildfire, and more people raised their phones, capturing every gesture, every derogatory tone, and every demeaning word from the officer. Khloe's tactical restraint in the face of blatant bias was educating bystanders on both the injustice and the proper way to handle extreme racial harassment. Finally, Khloe decided it was time to assert her authority more directly. Calmly, she revealed her status with a slight motion to her badge inside her suit. Carter's face, previously twisted with arrogance and superiority, faltered. He froze, shock crossing his features. He had no idea who he had been harassing, and the realization began to dawn on him that his extreme racism and unchecked aggression had placed him directly in the path of someone with far more power and resources than he had anticipated. The scene closed with Carter visibly shaken, caught on multiple cameras, extreme racism laid bare for anyone watching. Khloe remained composed, poised, her presence commanding respect. Her security detail subtly closed the gap, emphasizing that any further aggression would not be tolerated. The first public exposure of his abuse of authority had been documented, and the stage was set for the consequences that would follow. The standoff on Highway 101 had intensified. Cars slowed down to a crawl, some stopping entirely as motorists whipped out their phones, recording the escalating confrontation between Officer Ben Carter and Black FBI Director Khloe Davis. Khloe, mid-40s, impeccably dressed in her tailored dark suit, maintained her calm posture in the driver's seat. Sunglasses shaded her eyes, but the air of authority she exuded was unmistakable. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, fingers flexing subtly as she communicated with her federal security detail. Every subtle movement signaled awareness and control, even as Carter's aggression grew more pronounced. Officer Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy uniform, crisp and polished, had fully embraced his role as aggressor. His extreme racism was no longer subtle. It radiated from him in every snarl, eye roll, and pointed gesture. He leaned toward the SUV, taser raised in one hand, the other gesturing in wild, demeaning motions. "Step out now, lady. Don't think your little badge makes you untouchable." His tone dripped with contempt, each syllable weighted with racial bias and entitlement. His smirk was aggressive, predatory, the kind of expression that assumed superiority over someone simply because of skin color. Khloe's eyes, sharp and focused, flicked toward the side mirrors where her agents were taking positions. Two federal security agents, discreet but alert, had moved closer, flanking the SUV with professional precision. They weren't visible to Carter yet, and Khloe allowed him to continue his tirade just long enough for every word, every demeaning action to be documented. She understood the importance of recording every trace of his extreme racism, the way he thought power and prejudice were synonymous. Carter stomped one foot, glaring at Khloe with fury. He jabbed his finger toward her chest, taser still in hand, his gestures punctuated by the weight of his bias. "You don't belong in this uniform. You're too something else to follow my rules." The words were jumbled but dripping with contempt, a desperate attempt to belittle and intimidate her based on skin color. Yet for every threatening word he uttered, Khloe's calm response dismantled it, piece by piece. "You are under observation, officer," Khloe said steadily, voice carrying authority. "Your behavior is being documented by multiple parties, and any further harassment will result in immediate accountability." Her words were precise, deliberate, and unflinching. They carried the weight of her position as FBI director, subtly exposing the officer's extreme racism while signaling that he had underestimated her completely. The tension on the highway was palpable. Witnessing motorists whispered to each other, their faces a mixture of disbelief and concern. Some muttered under their breath, shaking their heads at Carter's brazen abuse of power. His extreme racism had become publicly exposed, a spectacle of prejudice for everyone watching. Khloe's measured composure only highlighted his irrational aggression, creating a stark contrast between professionalism and biased abuse. Carter tried to regain control, pacing slightly, fists clenched at his sides. The extreme racism he relied on for intimidation now worked against him, painting him as unprofessional, aggressive, and discriminatory. Every bystander, every recording device, and even the subtle movements of her security detail served as silent witnesses to his misconduct. Khloe's security detail, now closer to the vehicle, subtly made their presence undeniable. Their stance, composed yet alert, reinforced the fact that she was not alone, that any escalation would immediately be addressed. Carter's movements became more erratic, glances darting around as he began to realize that his assumption of dominance had backfired spectacularly. His extreme racism, once his weapon, was now the very evidence that would dismantle him. The culmination of this escalation came when Khloe, calm but assertive, revealed a portion of her identity. A subtle flash of her badge inside her suit caught Carter's eye. Recognition dawned slowly, confusion and panic crossing his features. The reality that he had attempted to humiliate and intimidate a high-ranking federal official, a black woman in authority, began to settle in. His extreme racism had blinded him to her true power, leaving him exposed in front of witnesses, both federal and public. By the end of this sequence, the standoff had shifted completely. The narrative had reversed. The aggressor, fueled by racial prejudice, was now vulnerable and under scrutiny, while Khloe's calm, calculated, and professional demeanor had asserted dominance. The extreme racism had been fully captured, documented, and rendered powerless in the face of strategic awareness and public accountability. The late afternoon sun glared off the asphalt of Highway 101, reflecting off the windshields of vehicles stopped or slowing to observe the increasingly tense scene. Black FBI Director Khloe Davis, mid-40s, wearing a tailored dark suit, remained seated upright in her sleek black SUV, calm and composed, her hands lightly gripping the steering wheel. Sunglasses shielded her eyes, but her aura of authority radiated, commanding attention without a single harsh word. Her federal security agents, strategically positioned in plain clothes, mirrored her alert calmness, scanning the environment with trained precision, making sure every angle was covered. Officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy police uniform, tactical belt and badge visible, had fully crossed the line into aggression. His body leaned over the SUV window, one hand aggressively brandishing his taser, the other gesturing wildly, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth as he yelled, "Step out! Step out right now! You think just 'cause you're black and got a fancy badge that you can tell me what to do?" His words were dripping with extreme racism, every syllable an attempt to humiliate her publicly. Fueled by prejudice and entitlement, the bystanders were now fully engaged. Motorists slowed down, some inching forward, holding phones high to record every angle. Carter had no idea that each aggressive move, each racial insult, each attempt at intimidation was being documented from multiple angles. His extreme racism, once a tool he wielded with presumed impunity, was now leaving a clear trail of evidence against him. Khloe's response was deliberate and composed. She leaned slightly back, hands still on the wheel, voice calm yet firm. "Officer Carter, your actions are being observed and recorded. Any escalation will be met with immediate accountability." She maintained eye contact through the windshield, her posture unyielding. Her calmness contrasted sharply with Carter's aggressive, biased energy, highlighting the absurdity and audacity of his behavior. Carter, blinded by his prejudice, ignored her warning and escalated further. He activated his taser, the device crackling with electricity, aimed directly at Khloe in a threatening display. "I said get out! You're not above the law!" he shouted, his voice quivering slightly with frustration as his extreme racism collided with his growing realization that she was not intimidated. The smug arrogance he had relied upon was cracking, his aggressive posture now mixed with uncertainty. Khloe subtly signaled her security agents with a small movement of her hand, and they shifted slightly, closing the gap while remaining non-threatening. Their calm, professional presence was a silent warning. Any further aggression would be immediately addressed. Carter's extreme racism and assumption of dominance made him careless, leaving him open to being exposed completely. Every aggressive move, every racialized insult, every intimidating gesture was visible to the bystanders now fully engrossed in the scene. One motorist, an elderly man, whispered, "This guy's got no idea who he's messing with. Look at the way he's treating her, just 'cause she's black and a woman in charge." His words were echoed by others, their murmurs growing into a collective awareness of the blatant injustice. Carter's extreme racism, instead of instilling fear, was drawing public attention and condemnation. Chloe's mind worked strategically. She allowed the taser to be drawn, the threat made, but no harm occurred. Every second of the aggression was being captured, not only by the public, but by her federal security team, who had long been monitoring the interaction discreetly. Her calm demeanor, coupled with meticulous observation of Carter's movements, was turning the situation into a textbook case of accountability against extreme racism and abuse of power. Finally, Carter's confidence began to waver. His extreme racism had emboldened him initially, but now it was the reason he was caught in a situation beyond his control. Chloe's calm, authoritative presence, combined with the visible security detail and the recording of every action, began to visibly unnerve him. So, his gestures grew more erratic, the smirk replaced by confusion and subtle panic. The realization was dawning. He had underestimated the woman in front of him, and his bias-fueled aggression had exposed him to immediate consequences. By the end of the standoff, the taser remained a threat rather than a weapon, symbolic of the extreme racism and misuse of authority displayed by Carter. Chloe's calm, strategic handling of the situation had not only protected her, but also turned the aggressive, biased officer's behavior into undeniable evidence. The public, still recording, witnessed firsthand how unchecked racial prejudice could unravel when confronted with authority, composure, and accountability. The tension on Highway 101 had reached a tipping point. Khloe Davis, black, mid-40s, wearing a sharp, tailored dark suit, still sat calmly in her sleek black SUV, her posture unyielding, hands lightly resting on the steering wheel. Her sunglasses shielded her eyes, but did nothing to hide the controlled intensity of her presence. Beside her, her federal security agents, dressed in plain clothes, subtly adjusted positions, ensuring full coverage of the scene without provoking further aggression. Every movement was precise, measured, designed to project calm authority, while keeping a watchful eye on Officer Ben Carter's increasingly erratic behavior. Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy police uniform, badge gleaming under the afternoon sun, stood at the driver's side window, taser in hand, his face twisted in a mixture of anger and disbelief. His extreme racism was on full display. The way he leaned aggressively toward Chloe, shouting over traffic noise, gesturing wildly with his free hand, was a textbook display of intimidation tactics rooted in prejudice. "You think your badge makes you better than me? Step out, or I'll make you regret it," he barked, voice trembling slightly with frustration as he tried to assert dominance. Every word dripped with bias, every gesture a blatant attempt to humiliate a black woman in a position of authority. The scene had drawn the attention of dozens of passing motorists. Phones were raised, recording the standoff from multiple angles. Social media would not take long to amplify these clips, and the extreme racism displayed by Carter was already becoming impossible to ignore. Murmurs and shocked exclamations rippled through the crowd. "Look at the way he's talking to her, like she's some criminal just for being black," one witness muttered, shaking his head. Another snapped a video, whispering, "This is insane. He has no idea who she is." Chloe remained unflinching, her body language exuding calm authority. Her voice was measured, precise, cutting through the chaos. "Officer Carter, your actions are being documented. Your behavior is inappropriate, discriminatory, and unacceptable. Cease all aggressive behavior immediately." She maintained eye contact, not a hint of fear in her expression. Every subtle shift of her body, every controlled gesture, reinforced the message. She was not intimidated, and her authority was absolute. Carter's extreme racism fueled his aggression, but the public setting had begun to shift the power dynamic. His gestures grew larger, more frantic, and his voice rose in pitch, revealing frustration as he realized his intimidation tactics were not working. The irony was striking. The very racial bias he thought would give him control was now the reason everyone was watching, recording, and judging him. The extreme racism he had relied on to humiliate Khloe had become a spectacle, fully documented and undeniable. The federal security detail subtly repositioned themselves, ensuring that any sudden movements from Carter could be contained quickly. Their calm, disciplined presence emphasized the seriousness of the situation without escalating it further. One agent, positioned near the SUV's rear, discreetly scanned the surrounding vehicles and sidewalks, noting anyone who might try to intervene. The extreme racism displayed by Carter made him reckless, and every move he made was now being monitored carefully. As Carter continued his tirade, Khloe decided it was time to assert a stronger presence. She slightly revealed the badge inside her suit, a subtle but unmistakable indicator of her high-ranking federal position. Recognition flickered across Carter's face, his smirk faltering, replaced by confusion and a hint of panic. The extreme racism that had emboldened him minutes earlier suddenly became his liability. His unchecked aggression and prejudice had placed him in direct conflict with someone far more powerful, someone with the resources and authority to ensure consequences. The gathered motorists continued filming, and within minutes, the first social media clips began circulating. Screenshots and videos were shared, the narrative clear. A black FBI director was being harassed and threatened by a white police officer, whose extreme racism was exposed for all to see. Comments quickly poured in online. Disbelief, anger, and support for Khloe flooded platforms. The officer's behavior, once an attempt to intimidate and humiliate, had become a public lesson in the consequences of unchecked prejudice and abuse of authority. Carter, now visibly shaken, attempted to regain control. His voice cracked as he shouted, "You're not above the law. You'll see what happens if you don't cooperate." But Khloe remained unmoved, calm and authoritative, projecting control while every aggressive gesture from him was being recorded. Her strategic restraint was teaching the public a vital lesson. Extreme racism and abuse of power are most effective when exposed, documented, and confronted with authority and composure. By this point, the social media amplification had reached a level that Carter could no longer ignore. The collective outrage of witnesses, combined with the federal security's subtle but undeniable presence, forced him to step back slightly. His extreme racism, once a weapon, had now become the evidence that would destroy his credibility. Meanwhile, Khloe's calm, composed demeanor remained the visual and verbal counterpoint, emphasizing the contrast between disciplined authority and bigoted aggression. The moment set the stage for the next phase, the full exposure of his actions to his superiors, the public, and federal oversight bodies. The extreme racism displayed by Carter was no longer a private incident. It had become a public record, amplified by bystanders, social media, and Khloe's own meticulous planning. The lesson was clear. Prejudice may embolden, but when confronted with authority, composure, and documentation, it becomes the pathway to accountability. The scene had shifted slightly as traffic continued to inch along Highway 101. Khloe Davis, black, mid-40s, FBI director, remained composed inside her black SUV, her tailored dark suit immaculate despite the tense confrontation. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, fingers flexing subtly as she communicated discreetly with her federal security team via subtle gestures and hand signals. Each movement was intentional, projecting calm authority while preparing for the inevitable escalation. Officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, in his standard dark navy police uniform, badge gleaming, had grown visibly impatient and desperate. His extreme racism, which had initially fueled his confidence, now manifested in increasingly reckless behavior. He leaned further into the driver's side window, taser raised, his face contorted with a mix of anger, prejudice, and frustration. "I said step out, now. You're not special. You think just 'cause you got some fancy title, you can act above me?" he yelled, each word dripping with bias and a misguided sense of superiority. Khloe's calm eyes scanned the officer carefully, noting his erratic movements and the physical signs of his mounting agitation. She subtly tilted her sunglasses downward, ensuring she maintained eye contact, a small but deliberate gesture to assert her authority. Inside the vehicle, her posture was upright and firm, the embodiment of composed leadership. Every subtle shift of her body, every controlled gesture, conveyed confidence, discipline, and unyielding resolve. Her presence alone began to unravel the aggressive facade Carter had attempted to maintain through extreme racism. Outside, federal security agents shifted positions. One moved closer to the SUV's rear door, ready to intervene if necessary, while another subtly moved along the side, keeping Carter fully within view. Their movements were professional, unobtrusive, yet unmistakably strategic. The extreme racism displayed by Carter, previously a tool of intimidation, had left him reckless and unaware of the tactical disadvantage he now faced. Carter's voice escalated in pitch and volume. "You don't belong in this uniform. You're out of your league, lady. Step out before I—" His words were cut short by the realization that Khloe's security detail was no ordinary backup. The subtle yet unmistakable positioning of her agents, combined with her poised demeanor, made it clear that any act of aggression would be immediately countered. His extreme racism had led him to underestimate her, and the consequences of that miscalculation were beginning to manifest. Khloe finally broke her silence, her voice calm but commanding. "Officer Carter, stand down immediately. Your actions are unlawful, discriminatory, and documented. Any further escalation will be met with immediate intervention." Her tone was measured, precise, leaving no room for argument. The authority inherent in her position, combined with the visible readiness of her federal security team, created a stark contrast to the officer's aggressive, biased behavior. Public onlookers continued recording, the phones capturing Carter's extreme racism and unlawful actions in high-definition clarity. Every gesture, every shouted racialized insult, every aggressive attempt to intimidate a black woman in authority was preserved. Social media platforms would soon amplify these recordings, ensuring that his misconduct could no longer be dismissed or minimized. The public documentation of his extreme racism was transforming the confrontation into a powerful lesson in accountability and systemic oversight. Carter's body language began to betray internal conflict. His extreme racism, which had given him confidence moments earlier, now left him exposed. He fidgeted, glanced nervously at the gathering witnesses, and shifted weight from one foot to another. The aggressive swagger that had fueled his prejudice was dissolving under the weight of public scrutiny and Khloe's unwavering composure. Khloe, maintaining her calm authority, subtly revealed her badge, inside her suit. The recognition moment was immediate. Carter's eyes widened, his mouth opening slightly as he realized the magnitude of his miscalculation. He had attempted to humiliate and intimidate a black FBI director based on extreme racial bias. And now, that same prejudice had left him vulnerable and fully exposed to witnesses, social media, and federal oversight. The federal security agents, trained to act decisively yet non-violently unless necessary, remained strategically positioned. One agent lightly tapped the SUV door, a subtle signal that further aggression would be met with swift and unavoidable intervention. Carter's extreme racism had not only failed, but had also become the key evidence that would ensure accountability. By the end of this tense standoff inside the SUV, the dynamics were unmistakable. Khloe's calm, authoritative presence had turned Carter's extreme racism against him. Every action he had taken, fueled by prejudice, had been documented and observed. The public, both on-site and online, now held a clear visual and auditory record of the harassment. Khloe had demonstrated the power of composure, strategic awareness, and authority in countering discrimination, ensuring that extreme racism would no longer go unchecked. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lanes of Highway 101 as Khloe Davis, black, mid-40s, FBI director, maintained her composed posture inside the black SUV. Her tailored dark suit, sharp and authoritative, reflected her professionalism and unshakable presence. She had remained seated the entire time, hands lightly resting on the steering wheel. Yet her aura radiated power and control. Around her, federal security agents in plain clothes subtly shifted positions to monitor the aggressive officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy uniform, whose extreme racism had guided his actions from the very start. Carter's initial confidence, fueled by racial bias and assumed authority, had slowly eroded. Each public recording, every witness observing the confrontation, and Khloe's calm, strategic demeanor had chipped away at the aggressive facade he had attempted to maintain. Now, with the taser still in hand but unused, he fidgeted, his body tense and gestures erratic. His voice cracked as he shouted, "You're not above the law. You'll see consequences if you don't comply." But the volume lacked conviction, revealing the doubt creeping into his mind. Khloe's eyes remained sharp behind her sunglasses, every movement deliberate. Her hands subtly signaled her security agents, reinforcing their positions without raising alarm. She exuded a calm authority that contrasted starkly with Carter's visible agitation. The extreme racism that had emboldened him to act aggressively now made him reckless, leaving him exposed to public scrutiny and federal consequences. Witnesses, still filming from the side lanes and sidewalks, captured every moment in high definition. Smartphones recorded Carter's escalating aggression, his biased verbal attacks, and the tension in the air. Murmurs spread quickly, and bystanders whispered to one another, "This is blatant racism. Look at her, calm as ever, and he's losing it just for being black." Another added, "He has no idea who he's dealing with. That's the FBI." Each new recording was a testament to the consequences of unchecked prejudice. Khloe leaned slightly back, voice calm yet commanding. "Officer Carter, your behavior is documented. Further escalation will result in immediate federal intervention." Her words were firm, precise, and delivered without a hint of fear. Each syllable was reinforced by the poised presence of her security team. Her controlled demeanor amplified the contrast between disciplined authority and Carter's bias-driven aggression. The officer's extreme racism had guided every decision he had made since approaching the vehicle. His assumption of superiority, based solely on skin color and position, blinded him to the real authority and oversight surrounding Khloe. With the public recording and federal presence, Carter's initial plan of intimidation and humiliation had backfired spectacularly. The extreme racism he displayed had become a public liability, drawing immediate attention from media outlets and social platforms. Khloe's team, skilled in tactical intervention, subtly tightened their positions. One agent moved slightly to block any sudden maneuver from Carter. Another positioned at the rear of the SUV, ready to provide cover or intervene if necessary. Their calm, precise movements contrasted sharply with Carter's erratic and biased gestures, highlighting the strategic advantage held by Khloe despite his aggressive posturing. Every second of his extreme racism, aggression, and intimidation was now fully exposed, leaving no room for plausible deniability. Carter, sensing the shift, attempted to regain control. "You don't understand, I'm just enforcing the law," he stammered, voice quivering slightly as his extreme racism began to betray him. Public witnesses shook their heads, recording and murmuring, while some began shouting in protest, clearly outraged by his actions. "Look at him! He's harassing her because she's black and powerful," one man yelled, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from others. Inside the SUV, Khloe remained composed, her mind calculating every possibility. She knew that federal intervention was already en route, and that the extreme racism displayed by Carter was the key evidence that would ensure accountability. Her posture projected calm authority, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, while subtly coordinating with her agents. She allowed him to continue, knowing that every additional second of his biased aggression would further solidify the case against him. The tension reached its peak when Carter's extreme racism led him to lean even closer, raising his voice further, attempting to assert control through intimidation. At that precise moment, Khloe's federal security team moved subtly but decisively. One agent positioned near the door, just enough to signal that any aggression would be immediately countered, while the other monitored surrounding vehicles and bystanders. The extreme racism that had fueled Carter's initial confidence now placed him fully in the control of federal authority. Public attention continued to grow. Cell phone videos were already making their way to social media, broadcasting Carter's harassment of a black FBI director to thousands within minutes. Comments poured in, outrage, support, disbelief, and calls for accountability. Every racial insult, every aggressive gesture, every misuse of authority he had displayed was now undeniable and fully visible to the world. The extreme racism that had guided his behavior was now the reason he would face immediate consequences. Finally, Carter realized his position. His extreme racism, which had emboldened him to attack, now left him exposed to the full force of federal law, public scrutiny, and social media outrage. Khloe's calm authority, combined with meticulous observation and strategic use of her security team, had effectively turned his aggression into a documented violation of civil rights and abuse of power. He stood frozen, taser still in hand, uncertain of the next step as federal oversight prepared to intervene. By the end of Part 7, it was clear. The extreme racism displayed by Officer Carter had been fully exposed and documented. Khloe's composed authority, strategic planning, and federal support ensured that the officer's biased aggression would not only fail, but would serve as a public example of accountability. The incident highlighted how prejudice and unchecked aggression could quickly turn against those who wield it, especially when confronted with calm authority and careful documentation. The tension on Highway 101 had reached its peak. Khloe Davis, black, mid-40s, FBI director, remained seated inside her black SUV, her tailored dark suit pristine despite the high-stress confrontation. Every subtle movement she made radiated calm authority, from the way her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel to the measured tilt of her head as she monitored Officer Ben Carter, white, late 30s, dark navy police uniform, whose extreme racism had guided his aggressive behavior throughout the encounter. Beside her, federal security agents, dressed in plain clothes, subtly adjusted positions, creating an invisible perimeter. While maintaining a non-provocative stance, Carter's face was a mixture of frustration, anger, and growing panic. His aggressive posture had faltered as he realized that the extreme racism he had relied upon to intimidate Khloe had become his liability. He leaned toward the SUV once more, attempting to assert dominance with raised voice and gesturing hands, but his words faltered. "You think you can just tell me what to do?" He began, but stopped abruptly as he noticed the subtle signal from one of Khloe's security agents. The extreme racism that had fueled his initial arrogance now left him exposed, vulnerable, and fully observed. Khloe reached for her phone inside the vehicle, her movement deliberate and unhurried. Every eye on the scene, including Carter's, watched as she dialed a secure line to the Pentagon. The subtle authority in her posture, combined with the strategic presence of her agents, conveyed a clear message. The situation was now under federal control. Carter's extreme racism had put him in direct conflict with someone of far greater authority, someone capable of immediate, decisive consequences. Her voice, calm yet commanding, filled the vehicle as she began the call. "This is Director Davis. I need immediate oversight on a civil rights violation in progress. Officer involved is engaging in aggressive, discriminatory behavior against a civilian, and the situation is being documented in real time." She spoke with precise diction, projecting authority while maintaining composure. Her words, though measured, carried the weight of the law and the full force of federal oversight. Carter's smirk had disappeared entirely, replaced by confusion and a hint of panic. The extreme racism that had initially emboldened him now became the very reason for his impending downfall. He gestured wildly, his voice rising in desperation. "You don't understand. I'm just—" But no one was listening. The call was already underway, every detail being recorded and transmitted. His bias-driven aggression had reached a tipping point, and the public scrutiny, combined with Khloe's authority and documentation, left him with no plausible defense. Around the SUV, federal security agents maintained a calm but firm presence. One positioned at the rear of the vehicle, ensuring no sudden movement from Carter could escalate the situation, while another subtly monitored surrounding traffic and bystanders. The extreme racism displayed by Carter, once a tool of intimidation, had now become evidence, exposing his misconduct to federal authorities and the public. As Khloe's call continued, witnesses on the highway continued recording on their smartphones. The extreme racism that had guided Carter's actions, his biased threats, his physical gestures, his verbal intimidation, was now permanently documented in multiple formats. Social media posts began to circulate almost immediately, showing a black FBI director being harassed by a white police officer whose prejudice was on full display. Comments flooded in. Outrage, disbelief, and calls for accountability. Every viewer could clearly see the stark contrast between Khloe's calm, authoritative demeanor and Carter's erratic, bias-driven aggression. Inside the SUV, Khloe remained poised. Her voice carried clarity and authority as she detailed the officer's misconduct. All actions are being recorded. Immediate federal intervention is required. Ensure full accountability. Her subtle hand gestures communicated tactical instructions to her security team while emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. Carter's extreme racism had blinded him to the reality. He was now completely outmatched, outmaneuvered, and fully exposed. Carter's body language began to unravel further. He shifted weight from one foot to another, fumbled with his taser, and glanced nervously at bystanders, capturing every moment. The extreme racism that had fueled his confidence now only magnified the visibility of his misconduct. Each motion, each aggressive word, each biased gesture became a permanent record, ensuring that no denial could mitigate the impact. The final moments were decisive. Federal authorities, alerted through Khloe's Pentagon call, confirmed that immediate intervention was in place. Carter, realizing that his extreme racism had fully sealed his fate, attempted one last gesture of authority, only to falter completely. His taser remained in hand, unused, as he stepped back, finally understanding that his actions had unleashed consequences far beyond his comprehension. Khloe's strategic composure had turned the entire encounter into a lesson on the power of calm authority in the face of extreme racism. Her federal security team ensured safety while documentation of Carter's bias-driven aggression was complete. The public, both on the scene and online, had witnessed the stark contrast between disciplined authority and prejudice-fueled intimidation. Carter's career, previously built on assumed dominance and bias, was now irreparably damaged, a testament to the consequences of unchecked racism and abuse of power. By the end of the incident, the message was clear. Extreme racism and aggression, when confronted with composure, authority, and documentation, inevitably lead to accountability. Khloe's calculated restraint, combined with her immediate Pentagon call and the presence of her security team, ensured that justice was served and public awareness of civil rights violations was heightened. The entire episode became a public lesson in confronting prejudice, maintaining authority, and documenting misconduct in real time.